In the name I am that I am, Son of Tomorrow, I call forth the light of the living word, beloved Elohim, beloved Archangel, beloved mighty Choans of the rays and the lords of Karma. I call for the action of beloved Pallas Athena, beloved Goddess of Liberty, beloved Nada, beloved Kuan Yin, beloved Portia, beloved Great Divine Director, beloved All-Seeing Eye of God, Cyclopeia. Let God's will be done, let God's will be done, let God's will be done. I do in the action of the sacred fire in this hour, descend on mighty cosmos, secret rays. I am the holding of the balance of Lord Gautama Buddha, beloved Sana Kumara and the seven holy Kumaras. I call upon the sacred fire, I call upon the light of God that never fails. Beloved mighty, I am present, come forth in this hour of the victory. Come forth in this hour of the victory of the God flame. I demand the full power of beloved mighty Athene with us this night. Beloved Jesus and Kusumi, Lord mighty, Gautama and Son of Kumara. Come Lord now in the victory of the God flame. Send the light of 10,000 suns. Beloved mighty Athene, mighty Athene, mighty Athene. Around this fortune now. I call upon the great central sun magnet. I call upon the light of God that never fails. Beloved Estella, beloved Estella, beloved Estella. I call upon the electronic solar rings of the great central sun in the service of God. I call for the electronic fire rings. I call for the rings of the great central sun. I call for the great central sun magnet.
And as the animated phrasings of Elizabeth Clare Prophet fade into the distance, I welcome you to another edition of Doors of Divination. I am your host and your navigator for the next 2 hours. My name is Robert Phoenix. If you have not listened to the show, then welcome for the first time. And if you are a returning listener, welcome back. Glad to have you here today. I'm going to be talking with Sister Myra in the second part of the show, the second hour. And Sister Myra was on with me about a month and a half ago, and it was on the heels of the Super Bowl, and she was recommended to me by one of the readers of the blog, and thought that she'd be a great guest to have on because she was pretty well versed in the symbolism of the various Super Bowls. So we talked about that, and we went for an entire 2 hours of just, dropping down and getting into the scroll experience and what that was all about. So that was cool. We had a good time, and was actually really, I thought, a very dynamic show, and we meshed well, and the feedback with Sister Myra was pretty tremendous. And some people had some issues with her content and what she was talking about, and I actually pretty much lost a friend over it, and it definitely challenged some of the people that are into the show and associated with the show. And but this is kind of what we do. We challenge each other, hopefully, and we challenge our perceptions in the world, and as a result of it, we can maybe expand how we see things, and hopefully get to what I think is kind of the ultimate journey, truth and why we're here, and and seeing through the various layers and levels of illusion. And I'm not saying that what I'm doing here or what Sister Myra is doing is the ultimate truth. That's up to you to decide. But what we're doing is we're unraveling the knots. We're entangling the knots of deception. And we are all kind of skilled at various levels in order to do that. And is it really a quest that can be achieved? I mean, can we get to the bottom of the rabbit hole? And can we understand what we call, quote unquote, the ultimate truth? And even if it is the ultimate truth, is it just the ultimate truth for us or a certain aspect of the truth? This is where things get interesting. So when I have a guest like Sister Myra on, or even a Jay Widener or somebody else, what we're trying to do is trying to decipher, understand, decode, and have a more balanced relationship with the dominant paradigm or consensual reality or whatever it is that we're experiencing. And so you may agree with it or you may not agree with it, If you don't agree with it, then that's fine. And figure out your own version that works for you. But does that mean that we just live in a world of subjective morality and truth? I don't really think so. I don't think so. I think that there are some universal principles that are agreeable and can be codes to live by. And I think that the best way to figure out what they are and how they work is how they impact your life. I was watching Ken Burns' special on jazz the last couple of days on Netflix, and I'm very interested in the bebop era and how bebop moves over into the more free associative and kind of the outer rings of improvisation with free jazz and people like Ornette Coleman and John Coltrane. And what was fascinating for me is the transformation that took place between in the lives of Miles Davis and also John Coltrane. And Miles Davis, if you're not aware, Miles Davis grew up in a pretty privileged life. His father was a doctor in St. Louis. And Miles Davis grew up on a property that had 300 acres. He had horses. He had a maid. He had a cook. So Miles Davis came from a very privileged background. And just like everybody else in the jazz community, what happened with Miles is that he succumbed to heroin. And heroin really shows up at the end of World War II. And maybe this will sort of dovetail into the later discussion we're going to have with Sister Myra about what's happening in Sanford, Florida with the whole Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman experience, and try to get kind of a more cosmic perspective on that. But on the heels of World War II, this is when heroin begins to make its way into the American cities. So, where was heroin coming from at that time? It was coming from Turkey. And it was coming into places like Marseille. And, of course, the Americans were in Marseille at the time, vis-a-vis World War II in the incursion into Western Europe, France, Germany, etc., Italy. And I think it would be an interesting experience if we could look at, what happened with shipping lines, what happened with we know that Aristotle Onassis was involved in shipping in a huge way. That make no mistake. I mean, Onassis was a huge mover and shaker in terms of illicit drugs. And he was moving illicit drugs out of South America. And basically, the drugs were going from the Middle East to South America. And then what would happen is that Onassis would bring up rum from South America and bring it to the Kennedys, which is where we get the Onassis-Kennedy connection. But we look at heroin really making a huge entree into American culture at the end of World War II. In the 1950s, this is where heroin becomes very popular. And most jazz musicians got to heroin through marijuana. They started with grass. That's what happened with Miles. He started smoking grass. And then he started to snort heroin and smoke heroin. And then he started to shoot heroin. Anyway, this is all, I'm getting to a roundabout point here. So Miles eventually, if you were going to continue to be a working musician in New York, at some point, you had to face getting clean. And everybody went about it in different ways. Charlie Parker wound up being institutionalized for 6 months in a hospital in Los Angeles, California, and he came out clean. He eventually got hooked again on smack when he went back to New York City. But he got clean. That was how he did it. He was institutionalized. Miles Davis spent seven days locked up in the barn at his father's property in Missouri, and didn't eat, didn't drink for 7 days, puked his guts out, shivered, and after 7 days he kicked it. Now Miles wound up coming back to drugs, especially cocaine. Miles had demons. It blows my mind that somebody who has a privileged life could have demons like that. But, for whatever reason, Miles had them and needed to exercise them. But it was also very interesting when you look at, Miles was a Gemini, by the way. I mean, we're talking about astrology, right? So Miles was a Gemini. And he definitely had kind of a dual personality. But you can see that in his love for younger musicians and staying creative, that he was generous with opportunity. And I think that speaks in some ways to the abundance that he had in his background growing up. He had an abundant nature with people like Keith Jarrett or Joe Zawinul or Wayne Shorter, Jaco Pastorius. These are all people that crossed the paths of Miles Davis. And it goes on and on and on. And he gave them all shots. And young guys, young, hungry John McLaughlin, lean guys that changed the ideas of jazz and music in general. It was through Miles Davis. So Miles came to be Miles by getting clean at some point. John Coltrane this is where I'm kind of going. I had to throw Miles in there because getting clean changed his life. And John Coltrane had the same demons that Miles did, only in terms of drugs. I mean, he had his own demons. Again, heroin, alcohol, cigarettes, they were all part of the jazz experience. You got to get out to get in. I mean, that was kind of the jazz thing. Get out of your way, get out of your mind, get out of your culture so that you can explore the fringe of the music, the fringe of being attached to form, because that's what jazz did. It challenged the notions of form. If you go back to bebop, everything about bebop was about taking standards of the day and breaking them down and exploring the musical DNA of a standard tune, and then chopping it up and playing with the choruses and all that stuff, and eventually putting it back together and saying, okay, we did this. We started here. We started with a theme. We repeated the theme a couple times, and then each of us took it apart and we explored it and we put it back together. And at the end, we took you on a journey, and that was the evolution of bebop. So anyway, John Coltrane was part of that, right? I mean, this is what he did. John Coltrane, by the way, is 0 degrees Libra. Let's throw a little bit of astrology in here. 0 degrees Libra. And it was funny because I was watching this jazz thing, and I thought to myself, I am the white John Coltrane of astrology. And I thought about it. It was like, it was kind of an interesting thought on my part, because I used to go to the San Francisco airport back pre-9/11 days, and I used to go there to just hang out. I used to go to the airport and just hang out at the airport and watch people get off planes, watch people get on planes. It was one of my favorite things to do. It started as a kid with my parents. We'd go to the airport. We would just hang out at the airport. And that continued through when I was a late teen and in my early 20s. And back then at the San Francisco airport, they would have stands of people. And they would have their causes. The Hare Krishnas used to hang out at the San Francisco airport a lot. I think maybe the People's Temple at some point were at the San Francisco airport. Anyway, there was a church in San Francisco, and it was the first congregation of John Coltrane. And it was this church on Divisadero Street, and they had a Sunday Mass. It was the first Zionistic Coptic church of John Coltrane. So, first of all, they were a Zionistic Coptic church, which allowed them, based on their religious affiliation, it allowed them to smoke pot legally. There's a whole history of the Zionist Coptic faith in Florida who were associated. The whole Zionist Coptic thing comes out of Jamaica. But then it migrated to Florida and migrated to this little island community in Miami where the Zionistic Coptic Church were enormous drug dealers, pot dealers, and everybody in this community smoked pot in a very big way. Even the kids. You were talking, 10, 11-year-old kids with enormous. And the reason why people knew this is because this church let NBC News come in and do a special on them. And they captured these little kids smoking just gigantic spliffs and getting completely wasted. And it was like, how long were they going to be able to keep that church together? Anyway, I think it was an offshoot of the same group. And they had this church in San Francisco. I don't know if it's there anymore. It was on Divisadero Street. It's probably not, because the rent in that area is sky high. There's no way whoever had the lease on that building would allow that church to be there now. There's just no way. Because back then it was an area called Upper Divis. And it was close to Lower Haight. And the Lower Haight and Upper Divis are kind of, low rent districts in a big way. That's changed now. Anyway, so they had this church, and on Sundays, they would broadcast their sermon, and there was a John Coltrane sermon, and they'd play John Coltrane music on Sundays, and they would have some kind of John Coltrane recordings where he would talk, but it was mostly his music, and then they would have, their reverend or their minister or whatever, and they'd smoke pot. So you would go to church at this place and get high, listen to John Coltrane, and have, a religious experience. So they used to hang out at the San Francisco airport, and they had a stand there, and they would sell T-shirts at this stand. And so I bought this T-shirt when I was, I think, 19 or 20 years old. It was John Coltrane, and the tagline was, "You play all 12 notes in your solo anyway," which I thought was kind of interesting, meaning that life is a full spectrum experience. So you may as well, play it out. So Coltrane got clean. So he eschewed cigarettes, he eschewed alcohol and heroin. And when he did that, he began to move into this spiritual territory. Now, the reason I brought this up, because I want to go back and circle back, because I started to talk about, well, what are universal truths that we can lock in on? If we were debating the veracity of the Matrix, and we're going to talk about Trayvon Martin later in the show, because this is a very, very subjective event that could be very polarizing to the Vox Populi. We're going to talk about that with Sister Myra. And we're going to talk about Neptune and Pisces. And we're going to talk about what I would call real versus unreal merging and union and dissolve. And we're going to talk about how that's manifesting, what that looks like and feels like, the real versus the non-real. And I think it's going to be important for us and incumbent upon us to be able to discern that and disseminate that. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to say it's all a fucking lie and not allow something profound on a collective level to change our lives. Because we are looking for these clues, and we're looking for signs, we're looking for signifiers in the world around us, just like directions on a map that allow us to get to kind of navigate to where we're going. And if we see a sign that says, gas, food, and lodging 10 miles ahead, well, we're going to take that sign as being literal. And we're going to pull off and we're going to refuel. And that's kind of what we're looking for. So there are some things that are not in our best interest in terms of letting go and surrendering and abandoning our autonomy, our sovereignty, our authority. And there are others where it's like, okay, it might behoove me to let go and dissolve into this because this is a bigger thing. Let's catch this wave. So this is the challenge with Neptune in Pisces and Chiron in Pisces, is to figure out, which wave is going to, put me on the rocks and which wave is going to, bring me to shore. And sometimes you can ride the wave that's going to put you on the rocks, and you can get really good at riding those. And that's a whole other thing together. But what happened with Coltrane was that he got clean. And then as he got clean, this spiritual reality began to emerge in him, that there was a clarity, and then he began to have a relationship with that clarity. He began to have a relationship with something that was emergent inside of him. And I think if there's one immutable spiritual law, it's that for the individual who is interested, and I believe that more and more of us are being called to be interested through various machinations, whether it's incarnation or dissipative structures or whatever, for the individual who's inclined or has inclination to have a quote-unquote relationship with a higher purpose or anything like that, that you got to be clear. And in order to be clear, you have to, whack some stuff away, whether it's relationships or whether it's food or whether it's alcohol or whether it's drugs. There's a time, I think, where people can go through those things. And look, I was a big fan of crazy wisdom for years. I was always fascinated by people like Da Frijan, who were these, and I never was into Da Frijan as a member or an initiate or anything like that. I was fascinated by their methodology, that they could take somebody and put them through their paces and break down their psychology and then crack them open, and then they could have get out of their patterns, get out of their enculturation, because that's what theoretically what crazy wisdom does, right? It takes you out of your enculturation. It takes you out of your social moorings. And that's fine to some extent, because you can learn some things. You can learn some things in the chaos, because that's what happens. That's what ensues, is chaos. You can learn some interesting things, but then what are the programs that are inserted after the chaos? It's either the programs of the guru or it's the programs of the ideology. I mean, this is what happens when you go into something like Scientology or in the old days, EST. You would have these experiences where you would be initiated. They break you down. You can even go into the fourth estate for invisible children, and they break you down, they break you down, they break you down, and then all of a sudden, something else emerges. There are people that are really into this woman, Byron Katie. And Byron Katie employs very similar strategies. It's like, let's get people snap them out of their trance, and then get them to start thinking about things in different ways. Well, crazy wisdom is like that, only crazy wisdom happens much faster. It's not like you've got a week or a weekend in order to get people to wrap their heads around a different version of reality. Anyway, I used to be into that stuff a long time ago because I thought it was an interesting place to be. It was a shamanic technique. I was very into shamanism in my 30s, but then I think I moved beyond that, and substances can be a real hook in the cosmology or in the realm of crazy wisdom, a real hook. And I think that there's certainly a part of that was going on in the jazz scene back in the 50s, because in order to, in some ways, experience jazz is an outsider idiom. In order to experience the outsider idiom, you had to be an outsider. And being a heroin addict certainly is an outsider. It puts you in the outside realm. So Coltrane decided that he was going to clean out and have this emergent clarity. And I think that this is again, coming back to this, if there is one immutable spiritual law, it's that you have to be clear. Yeah, you got to be clear. And then you can begin to determine at that point, where you want to go. And how you want to, pilot your ship. How you want to see the world and the universe and your relationship with your inner life. And right now with Neptune in Pisces and Chiron in Pisces, it reflects and supports this inner clarity. We don't need these substances in the same way that we used to 10, 20, 30 years ago. And in fact, they're going to be even more detrimental to us as we evolve very rapidly, by the way. Very, very rapidly. So I guess that would be one immutable spiritual truth, is that in order to have a interactive and reciprocal nature with whatever we call God, or the back end of our reality, which ultimately may be us anyway. But if you want to have a flowing, open, and conscious relationship, you got to be clear. And I don't think it's easy to be clear when you're dealing with substances or relationships or habits or patterns that continue to knock you off your path of emergent clarity. I don't think it's possible. And there are challenges along the way. You get good at one level, and then you get taken to the next level. All right, so let's talk a little bit about astrology. I took at a few birthdays. One of the things that I did on the site is I actually had a piece on art and senna. And if you haven't read the piece that I did on senna, I recommend that you read it, not because I wrote it, but because you can actually access a video that I found. It's an hour-long documentary. This is not the film that I saw. There is a film called Senna, and I wanted to put the trailer on my site, but the people who made the film don't allow that. They don't allow people to embed the video. So it's like, well, that's odd. Okay, well, why wouldn't you do that? Wouldn't you want to, promote your movie? Anyway, so I found this other video, which is an hour-long documentary on Senna. And in some ways, I wouldn't say it's better, because the movie Senna is very compelling. But it brings a lot of more in-depth interviews with people about who he was and what he was doing. He wanted to use racing as a platform for something much more humanitarian. Ayrton Senna was a mystic. He was a mystic, Formula One driving, international playboy. I mean, wrap your head around that. And not a fake mystic. This guy was the real deal. He was extremely devout, and he was humble. I mean, he was a humble guy. And he was a bastard on the racetrack, because all he wanted to do was win. I mean, he pushed people hard on the racetrack. But in real life, he was a very, very decent guy. And so I've got a piece on him, and looking at his chart and kind of getting into, what drove Ayrton Senna. Why was he moved to do certain things in certain ways, which is one of the reasons why we get into astrology. Well, I was looking at birthdays today, and one of the birthdays, now keep in mind, Senna is born March 21st, and Craig Breedlove, it's his birthday today. and he's born March 23rd. And who is Craig Breedlove? Craig Breedlove was the guy that held the world land speed record for a number of years. So here we have Ayrton Senna, one of the fastest men in the world on Formula One tracks, and you have Craig Breedlove, the fastest man on the planet, basically piloting a missile with wheels on the salt flats of Utah, and both born early degrees of Aries. So we're talking people that are born early degrees of Aries they're driven. Driven. They have a need for speed. Some other people that are born today, very interesting people. Today, a lot of interesting birthdays. Joan Crawford, Mommy Dearest. Today is her birthday. Let's see, Wernher von Braun, the father of the space movement, the space program. It's his birthday today. So one of the key words for Aries is pioneering. Aries are always seeking out new frontiers, new civilizations, to go where no man has gone before. And whose birthday was it yesterday? It was William Shatner, another Aries. And who does he personify? He personifies Captain Kirk. He personifies this pioneer as his role in outer space, right? I mean, Shatner was a perfect meld of early Aries personified as a TV character. Perfect. Now, I'm sure that Gene Roddenberry was very esoteric, by the way. He knew all about astrology. Gene Roddenberry was dialed in. And I bet that Gene Roddenberry sat down and said, "Oh, he's an early degree Aries. He'd be perfect for the role of Captain Kirk." So we can begin to draw some pretty solid conclusions based on astrology, especially early degree signs. Wernher von Braun, pioneering space, part of the Nazi and German air defense and airspace program, probably the father of the Foo Fighter, which was the German version of the UFO, which they were working on towards the end of World War II. So today is Wernher von Braun's birthday. Today is also Dane Rudhyar's birthday. The man who, probably the greatest astrological mind of the 20th century. I believe it's Dane Rudhyar, without a doubt. In the 21st century, that's to be mapped out yet. But Dane Rudhyar is the greatest astrological mind of the 20th century. And today is his birthday. And he, when we think of intellect and we think of astrology, Dane Rudhyar is right at the top. He was a titan, and he was a titan because he got there early. Dane Rudhyar was part of an intellectual explosion in the arts. I mean, he was around during the time of people like John Coltrane and Charlie Parker and Jackson Pollock. I mean, this was Rudhyar's milieu. So he was part of this intellectual, fervent exploration of ideas during the mid-20th century in the United States. Now, you throw that in with his classical education, his relationship with the Theosophists, and you get the man, Dane Rudhyar. Today is also the birthday of somebody else, Erich Fromm, who is one of the more important figures in the American psychological movement. in the 20th century. So we're seeing a connection here between Fromm and Roger in terms of their contributions at a very high level. It's also the birthday of Chaka Khan. Chaka Khan's birthday is today. And Chaka Khan was one of the few people that actually has spoken out against what happened with Whitney Houston. Chaka Khan knows the score. She knows exactly what's going on in the entertainment industry. And there's probably a reason why you haven't seen a lot of Chaka Khan over the past few years, because of her awareness of what's happening, or because the industry won't allow her to work. In any case, she's clearly recognized as having one of the great voices still in popular music. And I will give you a juicy, salacious detail about my life. I actually dated Chaka Khan's stepmother for a while, for a few months. This is back in I know it sounds crazy, but it was back in my 20s. And I met Chaka Khan's stepmother at a party in Berkeley. I didn't know she was Chaka Khan's stepmother. But we dated for a few months back in the 80s. Great lady, by the way. Super great lady. Today is also the birthday of Akira Kurosawa. So we're seeing here these titanic minds born on the 23rd of March. Kurosawa. I mean, you could probably take the 20th century and look at people like Spielberg and Lucas and, you know, the quote-unquote great directors of the 20th century. And you can look at the directors that influenced them. And there's probably maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 that really influenced sort of the great filmmakers of our time. And Akira Kurosawa is always at the top of that list. Always. Kurosawa, Bergman, Fellini, D.W. Griffiths, Eisenstein. Those are the big ones. Howard Hawks. Those are the 6 great directors of the 20th century. But Kurosawa was always at the top. And in fact, Kurosawa was the inspiration for Star Wars. The Hidden Fortress. The Hidden Fortresses was George Lucas's inspiration for Star Wars. His birthday is today. 2 great basketball players born today, Moses Malone and Jason Kidd, both of whom have, I believe, NBA titles. Yes, they do. And last but not least, or maybe last and least, today is the birthday of one John Wayne Bobbitt. Yes. We all remember John Wayne Bobbitt, don't we? How can we forget? Wow. It seems like so long ago, doesn't it? I wonder what John Wayne Bobbitt is up to. They actually made a porn film with him. So he was born in Buffalo in 1967. Lorena Bobbitt. That happened on 23rd of June. Family trauma. Whatever happened to Lorena Bobbitt? She got off, didn't she? Yeah, remarried. Let's see. So on 3/23, okay, this is different. Bobbitt married Joanna Farrell in Las Vegas. 2 months later, he was charged with battery and domestic violence. After allegedly attacking her at their Las Vegas home, she obtained a temporary restraining order against him. He had been scheduled to perform an entertainment boxing bout against Joey Buttafuoco. Oh, my God. Bobbitt became a minor celebrity, so he made a porno film in 1994, an attempt to break into Hollywood. He said he found God. It says here he found God at a glitzy Spago restaurant in Las Vegas when he had his feelings hurt by an insult, and back in his motel room began to read the Bible. He was ordained as a minister of the Universal Life Church in 1996. From 1997, he worked in a brothel as a bartender, tow truck operator, and a furniture mover. Not guilty. Lorena Bobbitt, not guilty for snipping John Wayne Bobbitt. Fascinating stuff. Okay, so it is 10:40, and you're listening to Doors of Divination. And I guess we've got some divining to do. We'll be joined by Sister Myra at the top of the hour. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick little break here, play some music, jump into the chat room, and then come back out and then talk about the prediction that was made by Terrell, I think it's Terrell03, that I put up on my website. And I'll talk about that. I'll talk about that process and how that manifested, how it didn't manifest, kind of where we are, and this whole concept of being able to pinpoint disaster. We're going to talk about that on the back of this tune. Let's do a little bit of testing 1, 2, 3. This is Michael Lee Hill, and I'll be back in 3 minutes and 6 seconds. All right, that was Michael Lee Hill, testing 1, 2, 3. And Michael, of course, the illegitimate son of one Eric Clapton. Believe it or not. I believe it. Kind of plays a little like Clapton. Clapton was a pretty trippy guitar player. Very trippy. Speaking of sports, speaking of music, music is kind of a sport in some ways. Speaking of music, I've been corresponding back and forth with some people around the whole Paul McCartney thing. Fall. And one of the people that I was talking with was a researcher over in England, and he was basically warned by people to stay away from really going very hardcore deep in public with the fake McCartney material. And this is something I've heard from other people as well, which is kind of fascinating. So if you're being warned off of something, there's probably a pretty good reason why people are being warned off on it. But I think that this whole Paul McCartney Beatle, here's my take, okay? I think the 60s and the 70s and rock and roll and the alternative culture, I think it's all going to be exposed. It's all going to be exposed. And I think we're going to see that, for the most part, it's all pretty much a lie. And it was generated. It was generated and programmed and manufactured so that we could experience a synthetic version of reality. The other day I was just in the chat room, we're talking about Netflix, and the other day I was watching a film. It was one of these biker movies. It was a biker film. It was starring Bruce Dern. And the biker films were part of, they weren't necessarily the heart and soul of the grindhouse theater circuit in the 60s, but they were related to it. And biker films were very popular. They were low budget, and they were all over the place in the 60s and the 70s, early 70s, in the late 60s. Were, it was like, okay, before there was Easy Rider. Everybody thinks that, the biker genre started with Easy Rider. No, it did not. The biker genre predated Easy Rider and was actually around in like 64, 65, really 65, 66. Marlon Brando was part in the Wild Ones, right? Was it the Wild Ones? No. But Brando was part of the whole biker genre, and then it went into the American International movies. This is where a lot of the down and dirty early biker films, Roger Corman directed films, took place. So the biker film was around pre-Easy Rider, but it became even more popular after Easy Rider because everybody wanted to cash in on how successful Easy Rider was. But if you look at those biker films and you get into them, like the film that I saw with Bruce Dern, so there's a scene in that movie where, obviously the bikers are psychopaths, but they're kind of portrayed, they're not really quite anti-heroes. They're portrayed as dangerous people, but they sure get to have a lot of fun. They get to take drugs. They don't have real jobs. They get to have random sex. But what they were showing in this film was how the women got initiated into the biker scene. And so there's this one scene where they pick up this woman who's sitting at a bus stop and they take her back to their little biker lair, their biker clubhouse, and they gang rape her. And it is a fairly, drawn out scene. And, one part of the scene is where they're holding the camera up from her point of view, and it's getting, and, you're looking, and so you're the woman on the ground, you're looking up into Bruce Dern's face, one of these other guys' faces, and they're kind of fuzzy, and their heads are bobbing up and down and up and down. So the information is that, or what you're seeing, what's being transmitted is that there's a rape taking place, and you're on the bottom. You're on the bottom of a rape in this movie. Okay? Now think about that for a second. Now these films were widely disseminated across the United States and the world. Then the scene after that, she's actually given LSD, a huge amount of LSD, freaks her out, she loses her mind, and she becomes a zombified member of this biker gang. And this is just one film. And I'm not saying this happened in every biker film, but this was how people's brains were transformed. This is how their consciousness was captured in the 1960s. It is through a myriad of cinematic experiences, musical experiences, quasi-spiritual, psychedelic, drug-related experiences. Now, that's not to say that there weren't interesting ideas that came out of the 60s, because there were. There were some very interesting ideas, but if you look at it as a whole, consciousness was hijacked, because I think something very high was taking place during the 60s. And I think that there was a distinct attempt to divert that. So that's part of Neptune and Pisces, Neptune and Chiron. And we're here to, again, kind of dissolve that, begin to wipe it away. What was real, what wasn't real. And Paul McCartney is the skeleton key to all of that. And when you get into Paul McCartney, you get into the Fall or Paul, Plastic Maca, then you begin to realize that there's something very, very dark that went on in the 60s and went on with the Beatles and went on with a lot of stuff. And it's continued to go on and still continues to go on. And is a very deep and profound state of illusion that we're being awakened to. So we're talking about individual clarity at the beginning of the hour, and now we're coming around to collective clarity, and to see events much more defined by not the signal that's driving them, but by our own experience around them. And I'll give you, for instance, let's talk about invisible children. Let's talk about Jason Russell and what's happened within 2 weeks of Invisible Children and the Coney 2012 documentary. That documentary was literally shot like a missile right to our right to our third eye, right into our hearts. Right? I mean, we have this heart-wrenching tale of neglect and genocide and abuse and injustice, evil, and using almost every trick in the book in order to move people with a very visceral message. We will not stand for this, right? And motivating people and moving people and getting people to be activated and do things. Because if you want to be an activist, you got to get activated first, right? And within a week, people are like, well, what is this? Who are these people? Where did they come from? Why do I need to care? Why should I care? How can I step back for a moment and look at what's being presented in a way that is slightly detached? What are they trying to move me to do here? And then something really interesting happened. Jason Russell lost his mind. He suffered a quote-unquote psychotic break. Now, that, there are people that said, well, he was under all this stress and all this pressure, which is why he snapped. But the work stands on its own. And we stand behind Jason. And we're determined to move forward. And Jason would feel the very same. Well, Jason Russell, if you want my opinion, is a multiple personality. And what we saw was not a psychotic break, but was an entirely different personality. I mean, if you look at if you go onto Google and do a search for Jason Russell, the guy has developed more looks in the last 5 years, or 3 years, than almost, I don't know. I mean, consistently he developed as many looks as Nicki Minaj. I mean, he has blonde hair, long blonde hair. He's got long brown hair. He's got glasses. He doesn't wear glasses. Short. I mean, he's got all these different looks and personae. So when he has a break, it doesn't surprise me, because my instincts tell me that he's a multiple personality, and a programmed multiple personality. If you watch that TMZ video, that is a different person. That is not the same guy. That was a totally different person. So now what happens is there a link? Is there a link between us unplugging from something like Tony 2012 and saying fail, bullshit, we don't believe it, and the program on Jason Russell breaking down? Is there a direct correlation? I think so. And so what we're being asked, and I'm telling, this is all part of the lead-in for when Sister Myra calls in, is, what we're being asked here is to question what the hell's going on. Why am I being asked to pay attention to this so explicitly? What is really happening? It's unfortunate that what's happened with Trayvon Martin in Sanford, Florida, very unfortunate. And we're going to get into that. But while that is taking place, and again, hijacking people's attention, Barack Obama just signed another executive order into place. The United States government has decided they're just going to go full on forward with surveilling people and gathering as much information and data as they possibly can, and being upfront about it now. That's what the difference between skulking around and telling and getting caught is that now they're upfront. They're basically telling us, we're going to do this, and there's nothing you can do about it. We're going to turn all of our attention onto all these intelligence gathering systems to determine who you are and what you're capable of. That's what's happening. And unfortunately, we're going to be debating, not on this show, but on a national level, we're going to be debating what happened to Trayvon Martin. And should we talk about it? Yeah, we should talk about it. But maybe for reasons that are different than what the press and the theoretical fifth column or the theoretical fourth estate, the real fourth estate, would be telling you to do. Because what people want to do is turn this into a racially motivated event. And it is kind of it's part of the divide and conquer strategy. And I don't believe it was necessarily a racially motivated event. They want to turn it into a white on black event. Well, George Zimmerman, if you really want to get down into brass tacks, George Zimmerman, the guy the neighborhood watch guy who unfortunately killed Trayvon Martin, was not white, was not Caucasian. His mother is Peruvian, so he's Latino. Zimmerman, from what I understand, is for the most part a Jewish name, even though he went to a Catholic church, was an altar boy. It's probably coming from his mother's side. So, I'm not an expert on whether or not people of the Jewish faith consider themselves Caucasian. I'm not an expert on that, but I would assume that some of them don't. that they may mark other when it comes to census. So I'm not sure you can bring this into the racial discussion. There's something else going on here, although that's where people would like to drive it. That's where Al Sharpton and some other folks would like to drive this. And I don't think it's quite that. Because when you get into the mindset of George Zimmerman, he's actually a pretty disturbed individual. And we'll talk about mental health, and we'll talk about how people are basically, in some ways, kind of groomed to go nuts. And we may even talk about what happened with Sergeant Robert Bales over in Afghanistan with my guest who has just come into the queue here. Sister Myra has arrived. So let's not waste any more time and bring on the star of the show from about 6 weeks ago when we talked about the Super Bowl and her breaking down the symbolism of past Super Bowls. One of the most popular shows I've done in recent memory. It's Sister Myra.
Greetings,
hello, Sister
Robert.
Myra. Hi.
Greetings. Hi, how are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm trying to get my energy up here on Friday, and I'm glad you stopped by, so maybe you can energize my vibe. I've been working a lot, sleeping less, so I'm doing my best to stay up and running here. How are you doing?
Oh, you probably hit the nail on the head. It's I think it's a struggle or a wrestle for a lot of people energy-wise these days. I just think that's the sign of the times. I think we're in a very transitional period right now.
We are. Yep.
Yeah, and so it's a lot of confusing things. It's like, we're definitely in limbo and trying to understand which way things are going to go, in what direction. It's certainly not going to be as it has always been.
Mm-hmm. No, it's not business as usual. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I was talking about that at the beginning of the show, and the original theme was, this whole concept of discernment, and I started to talk about, are there immutable spiritual truths and laws, and maybe we can kind of get into that a little bit. And one of the things that I was watching the Ken Burns documentary on jazz, and one of the things that really popped for me was John Coltrane's transformation, and going from somebody who was, the milieu for jazz in the 1950s was all about, it was about heroin, it was about, getting to the outside and finding the sort of the fringe of the notes and the fringe of the music and operating from that place. And then Coltrane had a break with that, and he got clean, he got sober, and that's when his spiritual awakening took place. And my point at the beginning of the show was, if there is one immutable truth, one spiritual immutable truth that we can have, it would be to attain a sense of clarity so that we can determine our relationship with many things, including God. So that was kind of where I came in. So I'm going to throw that back to you because of your relationship with Kemetic science and being a spiritual teacher and healer. What to you, if any, are the immutable spiritual truths? And if there are, how do they apply to this time so that we can get through this very strange and in-between transition stage?
Well, I actually believe we're in the throes of a spiritual reckoning of energy. The law of karma, I think, has been activated at the winter solstice. That's where we're dealing with Saturn energy. To me, Saturn represents the father energy of the earth. And Saturn is the lord of karma. So just like they had the movies out, Return of the King, The Return of the Father. And the Father is, like I said, the lord of karma. He's now trying to bring balance and equality and justice. We know Saturn is in Libra right now.
Right.
So, and Saturn is exalted in Libra. It does its finest work through Libra, which means it's reconciling all opposites. And I think the particular law of karma that we are dealing with, which is the most significant right now. I always tell people there's only one sin. You know, that's what my spirit revealed to me. There's only one sin, and that's that is the abuse of power.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how much power you have. Have you used it abusively, or have you used it compassionately?
Yeah.
And this is how we're going to be judged, you see. This is the law of Ma'at, actually. And we're now at the point where the Lord of Karma, you know, is calling us to the task. Those who have abused their power will now feel the backlash of that, will have to come down. And those who have been abused will now be lifted up to bring the balance, you know, even the playing field. And so most of the things that we are seeing going on today in the world, globally, it revolves around that. It revolves around, are we abusing our power, or are we being abused?
Right.
And this is the reckoning. This is the time where we're gonna find out. And it's not even an overall. I mean, it's like in the area. I mean, we've all abused power in some level or another. So all that is being exposed. Whatever level you have abused your power, you're now facing the repercussions of that.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever levels you've been abused, you are now being recognized, you know, for in that abuse, and it's all coming to a head.
Right.
We've completed many cycles, and it's now time for a culmination.
Mm-hmm.
So I really do. I love the topic that you wanted to talk about here, which was real versus the fake. And I think, you know, that the illusion is falling. And the illusion is, you know, I always say the physical is individual and the spiritual is the collective. It's opposite. A lot of people don't realize that. They think that you can intermingle the two. But it's really about the balance of opposites. And there's been, we've come to the epitome of that abuse. And now it's time, you know, to cross over to the opposite end and bring balance. I'm a holistic. So my formula is the equal balance of opposites is what creates a whole. And that is vortex, and that is where the energy comes in. And until it's whole, it's not real. It's all part of an illusion.
Yeah.
So I think we're really at the crutch of that right now. You know, exposing what's the illusion in this abuse of power and what's real. You see, when it comes to the righteousness and the equality and the justice and the fairness and the balance, you know, of what has been undermined in its value.
On an individual level, I think this is where I think it, you know, the spiritual battleground is on the individual level, and it's very challenging for the individual to be very clear with themselves and to be honest with themselves, and yet this is really where it all starts and ends, as far as I'm concerned. And if we can begin to have that salient relationship, and to be, and when I say honest with ourselves, it's like, you know, what's our intention? What are we doing? Am I conning myself? You know, it's like, you know, there's this saying, you know, keeping it real. You know, and the keeping it real is really an inside game. And the more that we can, you know, determine how real we are with ourselves, I think the better off we are in determining what's real on the outside, theoretically. So this whole concept of, you know, with Neptune and Pisces, Chiron and Pisces, you know, this fog, this ocean, which has potential, which has illusion, The real, the omega point really is us. That's where it's.
Yes, absolutely. And my thing is, and see, we're in Aries. We just went into Aries. Aries is the most personal sign of the zodiac, you see.
Yeah.
Fire deals with passion. And it's a fire sign. It's the first fire sign. It's the first sign of the zodiac, and it's all about new beginnings. As we complete the cycle in Pisces, and then begin a new beginning at a higher level,
right?
In Aries, and it's about our personal desires, and like you said, being true, with ourselves, from within when it comes to our personal desires. Do they conform to, or do they balance with the collective well-being, you see? It's now time to make sacrifice at a personal level in order to contribute to a larger purpose that will benefit the collective. How many of us, and you're right, that's what we're wrestling with. We're trying to figure out, what is personal versus what is best for the whole, and being able to discern within ourselves, am I doing, are my desires only because of what I feel personally, or do I desire what's best for, what's beneficial for a larger purpose? I really believe that that's where we're trying to do that reconciling within ourselves, and this is the contribution to most of the problems are because of someone is holding on to their own personal values emotionally, and rather than seeing the bigger picture. And so and then like you said, the Pisces, the Neptune in Pisces, the Chiron in Pisces, Chiron about healing those ancient wounds, and of course Pisces representing the sign of the subconscious. So this means going deep. This means going into areas where we hidden even from ourselves, from our own consciousness, and we pushed down and we denied, because we didn't want to feel the pain of, what was hard for us to deal with. So all of that is what we pushed down and hidden, and now all this has to come. It has to come out. It has to be exposed. It has to be exposed. Like I said, the law of karma. Everything has to be exposed in order for that law to be activated. In other words, there has to be an acknowledgement of what it is that we've ignored or pushed down within ourselves that we didn't want to face.
Right.
See? And now it has to come to the surface. It has to be exposed in order to be cleansed out, in order for the healing to occur.
Well, what's interesting is that, Mercury has just gone back into Pisces. So it's at 29 degrees Pisces, today. And
wow, and 29 is the most powerful degree.
So what are we doing now? We're reflecting, we're returning to this whole concept of, where does the individual begin? Where does the collective begin? What is a real impulse that resonates with a kind of a Piscean, like I don't know how much you've been following this Coney 2012 thing, but I spent a fair amount of time, looking at it, and trying to untangle, who's who and what's what and what's going on with this thing. Why did this film get just launched into our consciousness at light speed velocity? Who are the people behind it? What is the intention? All those things. And because it was so slick, it was so fast, it was so in our face. I think people were jarred by it, and it was like, what is this thing? And they began, and I know I did, and then a lot of other people are going, all right, let's figure it out, because that's where we are now. We're in this phase of figuring things out, and then you begin to look at Coney 2012, and you get into, well, first of all, Joseph Kony may not even be alive. I mean, there are people that live in Uganda that say, hey, we haven't seen this guy in 4 years. And, the word on the street is he's dead. So if that's the case, then why are they doing this? Well, then you begin to look at, oh, wow, let's see. They've just discovered oil in Uganda. How about that? Yeah, and, right next to Uganda is Central Africa and the Congo, and this is where they have been mining coltan for the last decade and literally obliterating, these wonderful indigenous cultures like the Bwiti, the Mashongo, and, these great tribes, and turning the Congo into a very, heavy place. And, who's behind it? China's there. China has most of the rights to the rare earth minerals in Africa now. And so, what's really, do people know that there are troops, American troops in Uganda? Well, there are. Obama has sent troops. So, what's really going on here? Are we being massaged to begin to think that, there's a new boogeyman and we got to get people there now? And if that's the case, well, then who are invisible children and where does their money come from, right? And then you begin to look at, that there are all these drug trials now that are happening in Africa. It's not anything new, but there's a whole new level of them, and people are getting sick and dying. And, so now invisible children is forcing us to look at this in a different way, where it may have been motivating us theoretically to be aboard some sort of ideology that we're being programmed to embrace. It's happening. It's having the opposite effect on us. Yes.
I totally agree. I don't. I'm that we create the problem in order to resolve the problem.
Right.
That's exactly what it seems to be going on to me. I do think there is an agenda that is definitely hidden, from the masses about what's really going on. And I don't really trust anything that they're putting out. I'm always questioning, like I keep saying, I am a holistic. So whenever I see the conscious side of the thing, I want to go into the hidden and look at the opposite of what is being represented, what is being presented. I want to look at the opposite of that, to put the two together to see the whole picture. Whatever they're telling you, you definitely have to look behind the scenes. You have to be able to read, but in between the lines. The whole Africa thing. I think, I might have mentioned when I was on the show before that I really believe that this is the reason they needed an Obama. They actually needed a black face to go in and conquer the black nations, you see. I think they've done the same thing to Haiti, undercover. It's been, they went in and attacked the spiritual people of Haiti. They wasn't brought in, from what I heard, they brought in cholera. And when the people were dying from that, they blamed it on the spiritual people there, the voodoo, the priestesses, and the people turned on them and killed them. Mm-hmm. And they're now taking over in that area. And then, as you said, into Africa, into the Congo, into all of it. I really believe that it's just all part of a global world order. I think everything, the stage has been set for that to be accomplished. And so it's definitely a hidden agenda, and it's definitely not in our best interest as people on the mass, as a masses, as a whole. This is about an elite group of people that is desperate for control. I think we're pretty much almost in martial law, even in the United States. They're conditioning us to accept that we have no rights, our rights are being systematically undermined and taken away from us.
Right.
For us to, to accept it, to become accustomed to it, to be compliant with it under the threat. And that's the thing. They, like you said, Coney 212, what they'll do is present us with some threat, some major threat, which normally is not real. It's not real. They'll take a situation and exaggerate it, expand on it, and twist it and turn it to, so that we would be up on arms, to come up and, have compassion for a situation that they can use for their own benefit. So they can get the approval of the masses to go in and go to the rescue. They've been using this tactic now, though, they've done this over and over again in these foreign nations.
Right.
So none of it. I don't believe in none of it. And then for what's his name? For the guy to go crazy. I mean, they said he was running around with no clothes on, screaming and
the video. I mean, there's only about 30 seconds of it, but the weird thing about the video, is he's a different person. I mean, it's a complete. I mean, people say, well, it's a psychotic break. Well, my feeling about that is that he likely is already a multiple personality, and that he's been programmed to have these different personalities.
Yes.
And what we saw was another one of his personalities.
Yes.
Because the Jason program had been terminated.
Yes.
For whatever reason. Right?
Yes. And, and I agree. I think that it's having an opposite effect on what they are intending.
Yeah.
Because we've been through this too many times. This is not new. They need to come up with some new tactics now. Because
it's true.
Because,
the old shit is not working anymore.
It's not working. We're seeing right through it. We're seeing, we've been there, done that, and now, we're seeing at a higher level. And I think that's all universally influenced. I really do think that we're coming into a balance of these opposites, the perpetrators versus the authentics. And this is what is being exposed. This is what my spirit told me a couple of years ago. It said, we're going to now expose the perpetrators versus the authentic. So anywhere you're seeing someone perpetrating themselves as something they're not, to gain control over, what is real, what is authentic, you see.
Yeah.
I think what you're seeing is a crumbling of that. I think that's falling down. It's being exposed. I think this is really a time of jubilee, where it's becoming bigger than the powers that be, that's been in control and has abused their power. What I always constantly like to remind people is that there's different levels of operation going on here. And we have to understand that whatever they're being inspired to do, there's something above them, inspiring that in them in order to balance out a situation. There has to be the negative pole versus the positive pole, like a pendulum. So I really believe that it's a bigger reality. There's a movie that I always tell people to look at to get this perspective, and that is the movie called 13th Floor.
Oh, yeah,
You're familiar with it? This one gives you a perspective of the many levels of operation, you see. And whoever is controlling things at one level, there's someone above them at another level also controlling them.
Right.
Even at the very end of the movie, when we got up to the highest level, you know, the last thing the movie showed you was someone was turning them off.
Right.
So we tend to forget that. This came to my mind from when in the Bible they talked about where they went to Moses and Moses went to Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go," and Pharaoh. After many things happened, he let the people go. But then, this is the part that was curious to me. It said, God hardened Pharaoh's heart to go after them. And I'm going, well, why would God harden Pharaoh's heart? You know, it wasn't just that Pharaoh, you know, just took it upon himself to go after these people, but God hardened his heart to go after the people. So that was always a curious thing to me. And now I'm beginning to understand, you see, because, like I said, if we're looking at this law of karma, there has to be a abuse of power in order to activate and bring back at the same level a spiritual return in opposite energy.
Right.
What I'm talking about is spiritual principles of energy. You see.
Yeah.
It's not personal.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, gay, straight, you know, male, female. These are principles of energy that if you use them, you know, they work. If you don't, they won't. You see?
Right.
So and it's not personal. So if you have, there's a universal flow of spiritual energy, and if you activate the negative pole, which is the physical sacrifice, then only then can you get the response from a higher level to match that in energy and bring back an opposite flow in return. And I think that is the crutch of everything that is going on at many, many levels. And if you abuse those principles, then that's how you automatically get the backlash. And that's why there does have to be a heavy, somebody who has to abuse the power in order to bring back the opposite response in order to fulfill or complete the process. Now, that's my overall view of these things.
So there is, I guess what I'm hearing from you is that there is an immutable spiritual law, and that law really does include balance and living in balance. So that's what I'm hearing from you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But then again, I have a Libra moon, so I would agree with that. Yeah. Yes, the Libra. And like I said, with Saturn in Libra at this time, which is, in my study, Libra does represent the father energy of the earth. And so the father, I look at the 4 elements. So for you, Libra air is air. It's the air, is what you're talking about, right?
Yes. The air element, and the air is connected to spirit, the spiritual. It's also mental. It's thoughts. It's, you know, I look at the full God family, which I call the full royal God family. I see that as holistically through the 4 elements representing the characteristics of that family. You have the air element, which represents the father spirit. You have the water element, which represents the mama universe. You have the fire element, which represents the sun, or the prince of power. S-O-N is the individual, and S-U-N is the collective sun. And then you have the earth element, which represents the daughter. The fire is power. It's our passions. You know, like I said, the air is the thought, the mentality, the spiritual aspect. The water is the emotional or the soul aspect. And then the daughter, the earth, represents the value, the character, the healing aspect of this royal family. And I think that, so we as individual represents the earth and the fire, the son and the daughter, but the highest aspect of that is the air and the water, which represents the father and the mother. And I do think that it is, and see, Pisces representing the ultimate water sign would represent the ultimate mother. You see, Pisces, Neptune back into Pisces. Neptune is the planetary ruler of Pisces.
Right.
I don't remember specifically how many years Neptune's cycle is. I think it's like 200 and something, it's over 200 years where Neptune completes its cycle.
Right.
And so it's back in Pisces again.
Yeah.
To me, that's mama coming home.
Yeah.
And Pisces is the sign of the subconscious.
Yeah.
So mama coming home to clean house. She's cleaning out the pollution, the impurities of false subconscious, one that has been manipulated and obscured. And this is where the illusion and the deception has come in at.
Yeah.
And now it's time, to clean that up and to bring clarity.
Yeah. I see the Chiron Neptune experience as being like this 1-2 punch. It's like, for me, Chiron and Pisces is John the Baptist. John the Baptist comes in and basically says, "You're a sinner. This is wrong." It represents radical social consciousness. That's what John the Baptist is. And in some ways, that's what Invisible Children and this whole Coney 2012 thing represents, is this kind of John the Baptist. And what happened to John is, he lost his head, right? What happened to John Lennon, or whoever John Lennon was at the time he died, he got off.
Yeah.
It's the same program. But that's the John the Baptist program. That's saying this is fucked, this is wrong. And then Neptune in Pisces, for me, that represents the Jesus Siddhanta, Yeshua program, which is, okay, well, if this is wrong, then how do we remedy this? Well, we remedy this by bringing a higher vibration into being and into consciousness, and literally vibrating above this density, and we do that from an internal place. And so now as a collective, we get to work that out, which I think is very interesting, and can be very dynamic, but it also forces us to be much more engaged in this whole discernment and discrimination about what's real and quote unquote what's not real. Now, as we had the Coney 2012 thing happen, another thing that happened is that we had this Iran I love you, right, which took place on Facebook, right? It was like, we've got this very tense dance going on with Iran and Israel, mostly Israel with Iran, to be honest with you. But the people in Israel, two people said, hey, Iran, we love you. And people thought, well, that's, maybe that's just really cynical, really arch. And this is, an attempt to kind of like, it's like, this is a Trojan horse, really. We're going to bring the Trojan horse to the gate. And it's in the form of a little postcard on Facebook. But then what happened is that it took off and it became really viral, and you had, hey, we love you too, and we don't want to fight, our government, we don't necessarily agree with the 1,500-year-old principles of our imam, and we don't get to voice our opinion. We actually don't have a grudge with you. And the people said, well, we don't have a grudge with you either. I love you. And so now we've got this whole other thing. And I feel like that was kind of real, actually. It's like,
absolutely. Because when I talk about the mother, our mama, we're talking about mama love, and this is that Pisces energy, unconditional love, you see. So, which supersedes, the air element, which is about the the logic and the reason and the negotiation and the agreements or disagreements. You see, that's the air element. Well, the mama or the mother is the one who supersedes that with, the love. See, love is not an emotion. Love is a power. So we're talking about the power of love. It's the ultimate power, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
You see. So when we start operating in love, that supersedes all the mental, discussions. Here we go. See, because there's a natural affinity between air and fire, just like there's a natural affinity between earth and water. The earth and water are internal, and the air and fire is external. So the air and fire is connected. So we're going to negotiate. We're going to talk. We're going to try to come to an agreement about what is personally of value to us. And this is where the confrontation comes on. So if we're looking holistically right now with the sun focusing through Aries, that's being personal in our passions and our power. But in opposite contrast to that, we have the Libra, you see, coming into balance and into harmony with one another by doing what is right, toward one another.
Right.
So we're seeing that coming to a head. We're seeing us combating with what is personally, our desire versus what is right by my relationship with another. And so we're seeing that energy actually come to a head. If we get the people out of the middle, those that are intervening, those who have a hidden agenda and that are there instigating, instigating because of their own personal reasons, they're instigating this fight, you see, between Iran and, the fight between Israel. And this is where on the Facebook they were able to supersede, everyone else's intervention and come together in a bond of love. I love you, you see.
Right.
It did take it to a higher vibration.
That's right.
And it did supersede, the control of the illusion, which is part of the air element, you see. So that's how I'm seeing. I always look at things from a higher perspective. I'm a very positive person. I don't like to, whenever I see when something shaky happens, I'm automatically looking at what is it connected to that is serving something bigger than what we can consciously be aware of, in that personal pain that is causing. So, that superseded that. And as you said, can you see how all of this is connected? Because, of course, we got to move. We got to talk about Trayvon Martin. You see.
Yeah.
And,
I was going to transition into that. And,
yes. But it's connected. It's a bridge because that's having the same response. I mean, I know they have to have, they're going to do the investigation and all. So really, in my opinion, this really started from a personal position of hate, you see. And but it's exposing something, and I think a lot of people, this is something that they had pushed down in their subconscious. This is not real. This doesn't really happen. Mm-hmm. But now this has been blatantly exposed, and the response is, compassion and love, everyone coming together, in compassion for, what these parents is going through. We have people we know, vigilantes, putting out, doing their own personal agenda in the name of what's good for the community. But that's not the biggest travesty of all of this. The biggest travesty is the system that has, condoned that, you see. when it comes to young black males, you know, and a lot of people don't really accept or believe that that is real. And this has made it so blatant and so, you know, it's so such a profound abuse of power that we've gotten a rally coming together. You know, a lot of people are incensed by the injustice of it. And that is exposed, that bond, just like you said, between Israel and, what is it, Iran or Iraq?
Yeah, Iran, yeah.
Iran.
So here in California, we had our own version of Trayvon Martin. His name was Oscar Grant. And he was killed at a BART station. And what was really fascinating about the whole Oscar Grant thing and tragic is that, well, Al Sharpton never showed up. Louis Farrakhan never showed up. Barack Obama never said, you know, if I had a son, he'd look like Oscar Grant. You know, and why is that? Well, because BART and the BART police actually operate under federal law. So they had an investment in not, you know, kind of outing. I would call a much more of a vigilante mentality with BART and the BART police. But now you have Sharpton in Florida. You have Farrakhan whipping up the masses. And, you know, Barack Obama was at his Rose Garden press conference presenting the World Bank nominee, and he says, you know, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. I mean, if I were the parents of Trayvon Martin, I would feel insulted that this man said that.
Yes, absolutely. The same here, because it really carried no weight in, you know, you could have kept that to yourself, because it carried no weight in contributing to, you know, resolving the problem. That just is, you know, the same as the chief of police saying, I'm going to take a temporary leave of absence. You know, well, you know, what's that got to do with the price of eggs, you see? You know, is that supposed to mean something, you know, as far as, you know, making these parents feel any better about what happened to their child? And that could have happened anywhere, and it does happen anywhere, and it does happen all the time, just like you said, you know, even with the BART situation. And this one wouldn't have been, you know, this happened over a month ago. And it only began to build in the attention because, here again, you know, the Facebook action, you know, is what really kept this going and fueled the fire for it to become the movement that it has. So they would have swept this under the rug also. And Obama wouldn't have come out and said anything until after it became obvious that, you know, this became a mass, that most of the people were bonding in compassion for this, you see.
And it's also spiritual. It's political, political grandstanding, and it's you know, a statement like that. You know, it's just bad form. You know, it's just egregiously bad form. And you know, and so we also have, you know, this other piece that's going on with the Obama administration, which is a very concerted effort by, you know, Eric Holder and the JOD, or the DOJ rather, and taking, you know, guns away from people, and, you know, theoretically taking away the, you know, the Fifth Amendment. The First Amendment, and this would be theoretically another example of why that should take place. So this is all, in a lot of ways, it has all the earmarks of a political end around, and really just being the word that I'm looking for is it's tragic that this has happened. It's tragic that people are taking advantage of it.
Yeah.
And now, you know, it's starting to come out. Well, who is George Zimmerman? And again, we're starting to get into this whole disseminating what's real and what's not real. People are saying, well, he's a white guy, and white people just hate black people, and he was, you know, racist, and bang, you know, he just decided to take out this, you know, this young man. And you begin to look into George Zimmerman's background. You know, his mother is Peruvian. He's Hispanic.
Yes.
You know, he was raised in a Hispanic neighborhood. His father, by the way, might even be Jewish. You know, and you know, where does this play into the profile? You know, of what's really being put out there, and we have to be extremely careful, because I'll tell you, Sister Myra, that there are a lot of people that would love nothing more than for there to be a race war in this country.
Yes, but I believe that is having the opposite effect, because, you know, even the neighbor that came out and went to the police countless times to try to tell them what she saw, what she heard. This was a white lady, you know, and it's been a lot of, you know, the people that are coming out in support, you know, are not just black people. These are, you know, it is creating a bond. It is, I mean, even the white people who didn't think this kind of thing existed, now it's coming to the realization. It even kind of reminds me of Katrina, you know, when the people were left there for so many days with no help, you see, and then they criminalized these people. I mean, it's interesting that I've even seen movies where there's been disasters, and you know, the white people can break into the stores to survive, you know, and that's called survival. But the black people were called looting, you see,
right?
In that same situation. But the people, the compassion that came out of the fact that, you know, white people did become incensed that you allowed these people to suffer all these days, not bringing them any help, you know, and that created a bond. That created, you know, I think it's like I said, this is cleaning up the subconscious.
Well, it's
and
systemic.
I think
there is such a systemic issue, right? I mean,
yes.
We have a systemic issue about the portrayal of young black men in our culture. Okay, that is a systemic issue. We have a systemic issue of George Zimmerman, who was obviously very troubled.
Yes.
A troubled person. And what caused him in his life to become troubled, right?
Yes.
You know, what were the things that and what's happened is we've lost this ability to take care of our own. And when you talk about Katrina, you know, Katrina could have been one of the greatest stories in modern history had the federal government gotten out of the way and allowed all the fire departments and all the people that were rallying with their own universal impulse to go down there and help people, instead of barricading them and blocking them off and turning them away.
Yes.
Katrina could have been a heroic tale.
Yes. And it almost seems like this is what the Trayvon Martin thing is turning into. I heard they were actually even coming out in England, you see.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because the travesty is, why not arrest this guy? Why not let the jury decide, you see?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the law that you have and all. You know, and like you said, this guy was troubled. You're going to call the police over 40-something times, you know, and actually on the tape. I mean, and then they're trying to say this law, you know, in Florida, stand your ground law, and I don't even see how that applies to the situation, since he was the one, you know, chasing down Trayvon, not the other way around. So how are you even going to apply that law? And these are the if the police had arrested him, none of this would be happening, you see. That's what everyone is so incensed about. Why not arrest him? Why not let a jury decide, what was wrong or right about what happened? Who is Zimmerman? I'm beginning to wonder myself because, the police chief would rather step aside than, to bring this man to accountability about what happened.
Right.
Why are they protecting him? What is it? And then we hear they've expunged his record, that he's actually had a confrontation with the police or he beat up a police, and they expunged his record. And what is it about why they are so protective of him? This is what has brought out the questions, and this is what has been very curious. Like I said, you have vigilante. We have this stuff going on all the time. But why, even with the BART police, he did end up having to be made accountable for.
Yeah, Messerly served minimal time, and he came back out, and he's working for BART again, right?
Oh, my.
But I think you bring up a good point is, why would they allow this to get tried in the court of public opinion versus pulling him out, trying to figure out who he is, what happened, so now what do we have? We've got something that is a flashpoint, a cultural flashpoint, which people like Al Sharpton, Louis Farrakhan, and Barack Obama can all, and whoever else, the Bill O'Reilly,
capitalize on,
capitalize on this thing.
Yes.
And it's perverse. It's perverse. That's the word I'm looking for the last 10 minutes. There was a level of perversity with this.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And you know what we're doing now, Sister Myra, is I'm not doing it. People they're listening intently to this guy's recording. Did he say punk, or did he say something worse than punk? Now we're trying to determine, is this a crime or is this a hate crime? And it's like, are you kidding me?
Yes.
And I'll tell you, this is a really interesting piece, and I wish we had a little more time to get into this. But one of the things that, if we taking this all the way back to Invisible Children, and Invisible Children, there's a guy who's a lawyer who is, he might have been Jason Russell's handler. His name is Jedediah Jenkins. He was with Jason Russell almost everywhere he went. And one of the things that he talks about in some of his videos is how the whole concept of justice and the court of law is going to go away, and it's going to be replaced theoretically by social media and being tried by what you say or what you've typed or what so everything that we're talking about right now theoretically would be part of our personal review in this new form of quote-unquote justice. And one of the things that we're looking at here, potentially, is why he was not pulled aside, arrested, and then tried in a court, is he's being tried in the court of social media. And this whole sort of formation of what is said or what has been written, and now we begin to determine the guilt or the innocence of a person based on their profile. And I think that's part of why this is getting played out in this way, because we're trying to figure out, well, did he say a bad word? Did the bad word connotate some ulterior motive? Was he hateful? Was he singling out Trayvon Martin based on his race? When the bottom line is that he did something that is tragic and deeply flawed, and why was that? Let's get to the why, not the how.
And then, but the fact that you're not, the fact that they did not arrest him, it sends a message of, we condone this, you see. And this is not an isolated incident. It's something that is happening, and that, the black community is well aware of. We just like you said, even with the Barclays, he gets a slap on the wrist and he's back. It's sending a bigger message that it's okay to kill black men, because you're not going to be made accountable for it, and I'm not even saying toward his guilt or his innocence. It's just the fact that you did not allow that to play out so people could actually, see that you were going to treat this fairly, no matter what color the victim was. You see.
That's right.
So, so this has been a message that, we've come to understand subconsciously. I'm a mother myself, and I can't even imagine, I have a granddaughter, 17 years old.
Yeah.
And it's not just Trayvon Martin. It's the fact that it has exposed the system of abuse when it comes to, people being able to do this to black men in particular, and not have to feel like there will be any repercussion for it. And that's why it goes on as much as it does. It goes on for as much as, and if it hadn't been for the social media, it would have been swept under the rug, just like so many other cases have been swept under the rug. I don't know what Zimmerman's issues were. I've seen people with the attitude that was exhibited through the tapes, and automatically, I do perceive it as racist, you see.
Yeah.
Because we've been under that type of, in other words, it has, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, if it, it is a duck for us, because we've seen it too many times before. And so this is not something that we can analyze. I know the white community has to analyze it to understand what we're feeling, but we're feeling something that we've felt for quite a while.
I think you touch on a pretty big issue, and again, it's like, and I want to remain sensitive to the black community, and certainly sensitive to the family and the community associated with Trayvon Martin. And I don't want to superficially gloss over what I'm about to say, but the other night here in the Bay Area, they retired Chris Mullin's number for the Golden State Warriors, and the owner for the Warriors came out and spoke afterwards, and the owner for the Warriors received a chorus of boos that was epic, and he was the recipient of those boos, not for anything really that he had done, but what the prior ownership had done, and and so I think what we have to be careful with is that we want to stay vigilant with what's happening, and we want to make sure that our emotional signals aren't getting played, and at the same time, remain constant in a state of connectivity and love. And I want to circle back to something that you said that I think is really important. And I think if we're gonna leave with anything today, and I really want to thank you for coming on the show today, is that love is a state of being. Yes. And not an emotion. And and I think if we can dialogue like this with one another, especially with our spiritual tools at our disposal, that we can arrive at a state of being that we can all be a part of.
Yes, I totally agree. I really am pleased that you did reach out to me, and we have made this connection because with both of us being objective enough and still passionate enough, and coming together, from opposite perspectives when it comes to our position in this world. I think it can go a long way to bridging and bringing better understanding as we, can bond in the middle.
I agree. I totally agree, and I value the time that you shared with me, and my audience on this show and on the past shows, and look forward to having you back in the future, because I think that we have a really really nice cadence and the ability to bridge these two worlds, which I think is vitally important. So thanks again. Okay.
Thank you. All righty.
All right. Take good care. Bye-bye. That was Sister Myra and 60 Minutes of really interesting radio. If you're listening now, you're listening to the podcast and not the stream, since I've gone over the podcast time, over the stream time, but not the podcast time. And, I think, do we have to work through all this stuff? I mean, can we just have a life and a spiritual experience where, we live and we don't allow these things to bother us, to play us? I mean, that is kind of like the modality of The Secret, right? I've never been wholly comfortable with that modality. I just haven't. And so part of my role and goal in this lifetime is to be a bridge, and to, because I've got people that say, you're too negative. I've had this wrong. You're too negative. You're too angry. You're too hateful. You're too dark. And then I have people who are on the angry side. Oh, you're too new age. You're too accepting. It's like, no, I'm neither of those things. It's like, I'm doing my best here to. I've got 3 planets in Libra, and they're all conjunct. I'm doing my best to be a bridge. And if there are times where I've got to be angry or dark, yes, I'll do it. If there are times where I've got to say, no, this is how I feel. This is the emotion that I'm experiencing, then that's the way it is, Or if I think that there's a solution that is optimistic or loving or of a higher vibratory level, I get that from people on my website. Oh, you're just a Pollyanna. You're just a feel-good guy. I'm not a feel-good guy. I'm not. I work hard to get to these places. You don't understand that. People don't understand what I go through internally in order to come to these places. A lot goes into it. A lot. Tension release language. All right. Again, I want to thank Sister Myra for coming on the show. It was great having her on here and sorting through some of this stuff. And whether it's Trayvon Martin, or whether it's Jason Russell, or whether it's Joseph Kony, or whether it's Robert Phoenix, you've got to sit with this stuff. And you've got to, if you're going to play in the world, and we're playing in the world now, to be in the world but not of it is the greatest journey that any of us could ever endeavor to take. And so you have to sit with the material, and you've got to define your own connection to it. Now, I know it's hard because people are out there, they're trying to make money, they're trying to stay afloat, they're trying to keep their families alive, their power turned on. I'm engaged in that, and I'm stretched, to be honest with you, with that, but I still do it. Why? Because it's important to me. I was again, bringing this back to Ken Burns' documentary on jazz. Branford Marsalis, it was Wynton Marsalis, was talking about John Coltrane. And he was talking about all the guys that were playing with Coltrane. Elvin Jones, Billy Higgins, Jimmy Garrison. And he said that those guys would die for John Coltrane. Or that they would die for him, or they would die for the music. And there was a level of commitment that Wynton Marsalis was talking about. And I think that level of commitment has to be experienced at some level in one's life. And that doesn't mean that you have to go out and be a martyr. That doesn't mean that you have to go out and be a lone gunman or a vigilante or anything like that. But what it does say is that you have to have a level of commitment that engages the totality of your being. So figure out what that is. And I guess for me, it is being on the planet and understanding who we are, why we're here, and how we can build a better world. And that's it. That's what it comes down to. And everything else that is related to me is part of that process. And it's taken me a while to get here, a while to understand that. Everything in my life is engaged towards that end. So there we have it. Again, I want to thank Sister Myra for being on the show. You can find her on Facebook. I know she doesn't really advertise her website too much, but you can find her on Facebook if you want to find out more about her. She's my friend on Facebook. You can become my friend. You can become her friend. In fact, I encourage you to become her friend because it allows us to begin to understand other people, people that are theoretically, quote unquote, different than us or come from different backgrounds, different positions. It's important. It's very important. And we need to break the world down in ways that are much more digestible. And somehow doing that can be challenging. But ultimately, it's the only way that we can do it and not be played by these other people that want to determine who we are and what our relationships with each other should be. That is the difference. Defining it on our own terms. And it's not about being an American. It's not about being white. It's not about being black. It's not about being Christian. It's not about being gay. It's not about being Jewish. It's not about being Muslim. It's about being human. Human. Let's define it like that. It's the most unassailable position that there can be. It is beyond denomination, culture, allegiance. It is about being human. And that's not a bad thing to be. In fact, it's divine. I suggest you check it out. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step into what's possible. This is Robert Phoenix, and you have walked through the doors of divination with me and my guest, Sister Myra, today. God bless.
In the name I am, Son of tomorrow, I call forth the light of the living word, beloved Elohim, beloved Archangel, beloved mighty Choans of the rays and the lords of karma. I call for the action of beloved Pallas Athena, beloved Goddess of Liberty, beloved Nada, beloved Kuan Yin, beloved Portia, beloved Great Divine Director, beloved All-Seeing Eye of God, Cyclopeia. Let God's will be done, let God's will be done, let God's will be done. I do in the action of the sacred fire in this hour, descend on mighty cosmos, secret rays. I am the holding of the balance of Lord Gautama Buddha, beloved Sanat Kumara and the seven holy Kumaras. I call upon the sacred fire, I call upon the light of God that never fails. Beloved mighty, I am present, come forth in this hour of the victory. Come forth in this hour of the victory of the God's flame. I demand the full power, beloved mighty, see me with us this night. Beloved Jesus, send to me, Lord